Exclusive Rentals uses the Ontario Standardized Lease and additional terms and conditions. In this video, we will give a general overview of the terms of the agreement. However, it will still be the responsibility of the tenant to review and read the entire lease. Should you have any questions surrounding the lease or the additional terms, please reach out to our team by email or phone. We are happy to help. We are excited that you have found a property to soon call home. So let's take the time to review your fixed lease terms and conditions. A lease is a binding contract, granting use or occupation of a property during a specified period in exchange for a specified rent. Section 1 identifies all parties to the agreement, landlord name and tenant's first and last names. Section 2 identifies the property unit that the tenants are agreeing to rent. Section 3 provides the contact information of your landlord. This is a good time to make sure you save this information in your phone or email so that you have quick access should you need to contact your landlord for move-in scheduling or even questions surrounding the property. Section 4 is the agreed-upon fixed term that the tenant will occupy the rental property for. Section 5 outlines the day rent is due each month and the total lawful rent. This section also outlines what payment methods the landlord can accept. Some landlords have the ability to collect rent by pre-authorized debit. However, some landlords do not have this feature set up with their banking institution, so their payment method could be more limited. If there is a payment method that is not checked, please reach out to our office to see if another payment option can be arranged. Section 6 outlines services that are included in the lawful rent. Utilities such as electricity, heat, and water are labeled as tenant or landlord responsibility. If tenant is responsible to pay utilities, then the tenant will have to contact the utility vendors to set up the accounts. The utility vendor's contact info is listed below for this reason. Section 8 is the deposit that you have given your landlord. Landlords in Ontario can collect last month's rent deposit up front. Last month's rent deposit will only be used towards your final month at the property. For example, if your fixed lease end date is April 30th and you decide to continue living at the property after this date, then you will continue to pay your rent to the landlord, and only until your final month will your deposit be applied. Section 10 identifies that the landlord has rules around smoking in the unit, and you will have to reference those details in the additional terms in Section 31. Section 11 discusses that tenant insurance is a requirement. For more information on how to obtain renter's insurance, you can watch our short video located on our website under the Tenant tab. Section 14 surrounds the rules around assigning the lease or subletting the lease to a new individual. These rules are expanded in Section P, as well as the additional terms in Section 33. Appendix: General information sets out basic information for landlords and tenants, and is not intended as legal advice and is not the official interpretation of the Residential Tenancies Act. This section was added by the Ontario government to make sure that landlords and tenants are properly informed. The additional terms outline a lot of areas, but we will only highlight a few. Section 27 outlines that any maintenance issues or concerns will be reported in writing to the landlord. The landlord's contact information is listed on this lease. Upon moving into your unit, if the landlord has further direction on who to direct maintenance concerns to, they will email this information to the tenant. Section 31 details the rules around smoking in a unit. In this lease, smoking is prohibited inside the unit or any common spaces inside the building. If you require written consent on where you can smoke outside the building, please reach out to the agent that drafted the lease for more details on how this can be accommodated. Section 32(o) talks about cannabis and prohibits the tenant from cultivating, growing, producing, selling, distributing, or smoking any cannabis plant or product within the rental unit or building unless for medical purposes, of which a valid prescription will be required. Section 33 expands on the rules surrounding subletting or assigning the lease. In a sublet situation, you will need permission from your landlord before you proceed, and an agreement should be made between the tenant and the subtenant so the agreed-upon payment and the terms are laid out clearly. If you have roommates, you should talk to them about your interest in subletting and make sure they agree to these arrangements. A sublet means the tenant will return to the property after the end of the sublet term. The sublet will pay the tenant, and this amount should be identified in the written agreement. If a tenant would like to assign the lease, then a new tenant would be found to assume the remaining responsibilities of the lease, and the landlord will need to approve of this. There could be additional fees to assigning your room should you look for assistance from the landlord to find replacements. Always contact your landlord before you decide to sublet or assign the property to find out the complete process. Section 35 outlines the requirements surrounding tenant insurance. As a renter, you do need to have this coverage. In the event that there was a disaster such as a fire or flood, or even a burglary, and tenant belongings were damaged, this would be the responsibility of the tenant to replace or to make a claim with their insurance. The landlord's insurance will only cover the property itself, no contents. If you are a student and your parents are homeowners, ask them to look into their home insurance policy, as there may be coverage options available to you through their policy. If you are obtaining tenant insurance on your own, there are very reasonable options available for you. Section 45. Obligations to the lease are joint and several, meaning that all tenants on the lease are responsible for the full monthly rent, even if you are splitting it. If one roommate defaults, you can all be held responsible for those unpaid rent arrears. In cases like this, we recommend you make a roommate agreement. See our video on roommate agreements, where you can determine house rules that could surround responsibilities of rent payments, utilities, guests, or house cleaning. This is always a good idea to iron out before you move in together, so you have a resource to refer back to if there were any disagreements on a matter. Sometimes your lease may have additional schedules that address particular surroundings and details of the property. For example, an additional schedule to the lease could address items such as details about furniture provided by the landlord for the tenant, details of upgrades or renovations agreed on between the landlord and tenant, details on who is responsible for landscape management or snow removal. Check your lease for these schedules and read them thoroughly. We hope that this brief overview was helpful to you. We are always here to help should you have any questions surrounding the rental process or the lease.